We're going to be looking at the end of year writing tasks for year 7 to 9. And in the writing task, you will need to complete 2 writing tasks, and one is a longer writing task, the other is a shorter writing task. The longer writing task is approximately 40 to 45 minutes, and the shorter writing task is approximately 20 to 25 minutes. Both of the tasks will give you some background and suggest the sort of things you should include in your answer. So when you read the question that's giving you the task, it will give you a full indication of what it expects you to write about and who you're writing to. Each task will have a different purpose and form. For example, you may be telling a story, so this would be a fictional piece of writing, creative writing, or you could be writing a letter, a persuasive letter to, say, a member of parliament, or composing a report, a business report. So you have 2 tasks, a longer task, a shorter task. Both of the tasks will be very specific about what they're looking for, and they will both have a different form and purpose. And when you're looking at the question, you want to ask yourself 4 questions. So before you start writing and as you're planning, you need to think of, what am I writing? So that's the format. Are you writing a letter? Is it a novel? Is it a newspaper article? Why am I writing? Which is the purpose of the writing? Who am I writing for? Which is the audience? And what is my role? Which you will sometimes be given a role other than yourself. Example, a newspaper reporter, a headmaster, or a fiction writer. So the first one, what am I writing? You need to look at the format word in the question paper. Example, write a letter, letter being the format word. Write an account, a chapter of your story, a leaflet, a speech, a report, or a newspaper article. And you need to keep this format in mind as you plan and write. Most formats have their own conventions, which are like the ingredients that you need to put into that format. So for example, a newspaper article should include short paragraphs, short sentences, and use a clear and lively style to both entertain and inform the readers. The first paragraph of a newspaper article should also answer the question who, what, where and when, so the readers get a full idea of what is happening and what you're reporting on. However, if you're asked to do a report, which could be like a business report, this is usually very factual and much more formal. An example would be a school report or a business report, and reports use clear and formal language and also a reasonable tone, so nothing too emotional or too involved from you as a writer. Impersonal phrases could be used in a report, such as "it is better if," a good example is, so you want to be a little more detached for report writing. So once you've found out what the format is, you then need to identify the content. So what are you writing about, or the topic? So for example, a letter describing your visit to, for example, a zoo, or a report describing some kind of project. Then you would ask, why am I writing? You need to work out the purpose of your writing. Stories, fiction stories are easy. Their purpose is to entertain. It's a little harder for non-fiction. You must look for the key word in the question. The key word could be, could you inform us? Could you explain to us? Could you describe? Could you persuade? Could you argue or advise? Analyze, review, or comment. So for non-fiction, you want to really look for what that keyword is. The next question you should ask yourself is, who am I writing for? Now, you need to keep in mind your audience. Every piece of writing has an intended audience, and you need to keep this in mind when you plan and write your piece. And you also have to adjust what you are writing to what they want to read. And worth remembering too is that the audience is not the examiner, but the person or people indicated in the question paper. So the audience could be your grandmother, the head teacher, the prime minister, your cousin in America, or the manager of a factory. So you need to look at the question carefully and work out who the audience of your writing is. The next question is, what is my role? You will often be told to imagine you are a particular person other than yourself. So you could be asked to be a local resident of a housing estate. You could be a head teacher. You could be a newspaper reporter. And this is the role that you need to keep for the whole of the writing task. Each role will demand its own voice. You could be anything from very personal and friendly to distant and formal. And the voice you choose also depends on the purpose, which is why you're writing, and the audience who you're writing to. So what you need to do is you need to, before you start writing, get into role and keep the voice of the writing absolutely consistent, which means you shouldn't be changing your point of view. For example, you shouldn't be changing it from a student's to a teacher's perspective, or you shouldn't be moving from first person to third person narration in a creative piece of writing, unless you're doing that for deliberate creative effect. You should not change the formality of the language unless, again, for deliberate effect. So if you start formal, you usually should end formal. And also don't change the tone of the writing, so don't change from light-hearted to serious. This is an example of a longer writing task. So you will have the section A to tell you whether it is the shorter or the longer writing task, and then underneath that you'll usually have a heading, and the heading will give you an indication of the context of your writing, so what you're going to be writing about. Underneath that you will then get very specific instructions. So, for example, you work for a company that is building a new leisure centre. Your manager has sent you this memo. Please report on the progress so far. Write a detailed report explaining A, how the different sports and leisure facilities are progressing, both in quality and speed, and how well the construction workers are addressing the task. Also, whether you see any problems with the leisure centre at this stage. After that, you usually get a summary of what they're looking for. Write a report for your manager explaining what progress is being made in the building of the leisure centre. So here I have highlighted in red keywords or important things to consider when you start planning and before you start writing. Number one, you work for a company that is building a new leisure centre. So you are no longer a student sitting an examination in the hall. You now work for a company that is building this leisure centre, and your audience is your manager. Your manager has sent you a memo, and he wants, the format is a report, a detailed report explaining how the different sports and leisure facilities are progressing, all the way down to whether you see any problems. Now, you should use this also as a guideline to the structuring of your report. Each extended writing task usually gives some structuring guidelines to help you put the piece together. And then at the end we have write a report for your manager explaining what progress is being made in the building of the leisure centre. So there we have an example of a Section A writing task. This is an example of a very different type of longer writing task. The heading is New Worlds, New Experiences. You are writing a story about the first landing on a new planet. Your characters have been traveling in space for over a year and have finally landed on this new planet. Below are some notes you have made for the next chapter of this novel. Notes for chapter about landing on Planet X include how the characters feel after traveling for over a year, worries and concerns they have about what is about to happen, and their first reaction to Planet X. Character notes. Anne is a get up and go sort of person. She has found the journey really difficult. Ahmed is impatient to explore Planet X. Steve is very aware of the possible dangers of a new planet. Again, in red, some key points. We now know it's a story, so the purpose is to entertain. It's a creative writing piece. Your audience would be the general public. The content is, it's a sci-fi novel. It's about the first landing on a new planet. We then have bullet points here which will help you to structure the work, and this will also help you to inform the characterization. And then at the bottom, very clear instruction of write the next chapter of your novel. The third and final example of a longer writing task, money matters. You have just received the following information from the school governors. The governors are delighted to announce that Liz Day, a past student, has made a gift of £10,000 to the school. The governors would like to know what you, the students, think this money should be spent on. Some suggestions are listed below, or you can make up your own suggestion. Suggestions here, bullet pointed. Use the money to buy new computer equipment, buy new books for the school library, spend it on a school visit for the whole school, build a statue of Miss Day to express thanks, develop the school's sports facilities, or buy new musical instruments. Then again, the summary, write a letter to the governors to persuade them to spend the money on the project of your choice. So a persuasive letter to the governors, which would be quite formal. An example of a section B shorter writing task. We have the heading again, the haunted castle, and then we have the context. Imagine you are a newspaper reporter who has been asked to write an article about a group of people who believe in ghosts. You go with the group to spend a night in a haunted castle. The editor of the newspaper sends you this note. I think you should be able to write a really good article about your night in the haunted castle. Remember to write about what the castle was like, what happened when you were there, and how you felt. Oh, and say whether you believed in ghosts before you went and whether you believe in ghosts now. Write the article for the newspaper about the night you spent at the haunted castle. You do not need to set it out like a newspaper article, which would be headlines and photographs and columns. So you don't need to do that. Again, here we have a very clear guideline to what the structuring could be. We know your role, you're a newspaper reporter. We know the audience. It's not just the editor, it's also the general public, so it needs to be an entertaining and informative piece of writing. Okay, if we now look at what you will get marks for, you get marks for 4 different categories. Category 1, composition and effect. 2, sentence structure and punctuation. 3, text structure and organization. And finally, spelling. Composition and effect, this means the style, the form, and the language that you use. So how interesting or imaginative your writing is, how effective it is, and how well it fits the audience. How the style, the conventions used, and the tone suits the purpose, what it's asking you to do, of the task, and how varied and effective the vocabulary is. After this, we have sentence structure and punctuation. So this is looking at the work on a sentence level, which means how well organized your sentences are and whether you have used punctuation to make your meaning clear. So you should be looking at using 3 different types of sentences, using simple, compound, and complex. You should also be looking at embedding clauses into those sentences and also using a variety of punctuation marks. So don't just rely on the comma and the full stop. Look for opportunities to use question marks, to ask a question in your writing, to use the ... ellipses or dashes, exclamation marks, colons and semicolons, and even brackets. So put in as much punctuation as you can. Because for that you will start gaining the marks. And also make sure your sentence structures are correct and they are varied. So be aware of not comma splicing or creating run-on sentences. Then we have text structure and organization. So this is not looking at the work on a sentence level, it's looking at the complete piece of work. So this means how well organized your whole text is. So this is looking at the paragraphs and the structuring or the ordering of those paragraphs. And there should be a reason for the ordering of the paragraphs. It should make some kind of logical sense. Finally, we have spelling, and spelling is only marked in the shorter writing task. So you can gain or lose marks in spelling for the shorter 25-minute writing task. But advice would be to keep your spelling as strong as you can for both of the writing tasks. Finally, timing and planning. You will have approximately 60 minutes to complete the writing test. Sometimes it's a little bit more, so in year 9 the writing examination might last approximately 10 minutes longer. You'll have 40 minutes for the longer writing task, which includes up to 10 minutes of planning time, 20 minutes for the shorter writing task, including up to 5 minutes planning time. And it is essential that you use this planning time, because without an effective use of planning time, your work will possibly be lacking structure. And then towards the end of the exam, you should spend the last 5 minutes checking what you have written and trying to improve the spelling, adding to the punctuation if possible, and also improving vocabulary choices. And this will help you to gain marks. Okay, so that was an overview of the writing tasks for your end of year examinations.